If you, my listener, care about justice, one of the things that you will certainly start paying attention to with our efforts to help you will be the prison industrial complex. That is to say, the system of justice, as it's called in Tennessee, prison that administers justice or administers equity, and that has a punitive and perhaps restorative effect on those who are involved in crimes against the state. Now, we have a system of law. It's a positivist law system where the state is the offended party, and crimes, even murder, even common law crimes, are against it. And so when you're punished for murder, you're punished for manslaughter or fraud, it is the victim, and the restitution you're making is to it. Now, victims are not given any kind of restitution. And this is a grievous problem that a few Christians have noticed, and it's my hope here at Nooga Radio and at Nooganomics to suggest that that Christianity, with its social theory, its view of progress, really demands reform in the administration of justice in Tennessee and elsewhere, and that is that the victim receive compensation, and the state is not the injured party; it is the victim who is. Now, there's a man here in Chattanooga working at a Christian ministry called Prison Prevention Ministries that has a goal of keeping people out of that complex. It is a state-run business. It is a form of legal slavery. Slavery in Tennessee is allowed. We have legal slavery if for a crime duly convicted. It's a constitutional provision that allows that, and there are many thousands of people in the custody of the Tennessee Department of Correction. And David Johnson and his prison prevention ministry is trying to keep people out of that system. David, you've been the executive director for 5 years of this ministry. You're 64 years old and have led a long career in city government, most recently in the administration of Mayor Littlefield. You were 6 years with him. And prior to that, you were 30 years with the city, 15 and a half as a manager. What is your work about now, David Johnson?
Well, our work is about going into the correctional facilities and exposing inmates, both male and female, to Christian values by which they can make their life choices on. We call it a life skills seminar. And it's 12 weeks, and we offer this 4 times a year. We are in 8 correctional facilities. CCA Silverdale, Hamilton County Jail, Bradley County Jail, Walker State down in Rock Springs, Georgia, Dalton Juvenile, the Next Door, the Salvation Army, and Hamilton County Juvenile. So we go in there either daily or weekly, and we have seminars, or we have worship services, or we have classes, and we try to encourage inmates to either remember or expose them to, for the first time, to Christian values or biblical values on which to make decision-making, so that when they are faced with that, when they get out, they will make the right choices and choose the right path rather than continue and come back into the penal system.
Well, my listener thinks the word values is a little vague. Could you be maybe more specific? You say introduce them to Christian values. Do you mean perhaps Christian heroes of the faith, let's say David or Moses or Peter? I mean, what do you mean?
Well, okay, we do Bible studies, in-depth Bible studies, and we did do the life of David. We have done Psalms. We have done Proverbs. Proverbs gives you a choices most of the time, that if you do this, if you choose this way to live, then this is the result. If you don't choose this way to live, then this is the result. So we teach Proverbs. We teach Ephesians, where it talks about putting on the armor of God, using his word to help you make decision making, using his word to reject returning back like you were. We do Old Testament studies of heroes of the Bible. So it is biblical based. It is principles that the prophets and that Jesus taught on how we are to live and how we are to live a life that is different than what we have lived in the past.
So your ministry presupposes something about God's character and God's revelation. It presupposes that that God, as the Creator, gave a law to mankind summarized in the Ten Commandments. And there are two ways of dealing with God's claims upon humanity. One, obey these commandments and the details in your life and be blessed, or disobey these commandments and be judged or cursed or destroyed.
Well, yes, and that's simplistic view. We're dealing with inmates who, where are they? They are incarcerated. Why are they incarcerated? Because they have chosen to do that which the Bible teaches not to do. They have chosen to live a life for their own self-fulfillment or their own self-pleasure. They have hurt their family. They have made poor decisions because perhaps they were not exposed to this is what the Bible says. We have a lot of young men and women that are hearing about truth for the first time, and then we have a lot that were grown up in church and in faith, but they had chosen not to do that. And so we are trying to reinforce that so that they will not continue on that same path.
What does your ministry make of public education in Chattanooga? Public schools are perhaps the largest church, and the religion of public school is pragmatism and materialism, and very much in the words that you use, and that's the decision-making model. The decision-making model is pragmatic. It says, well, don't take drugs because you may be arrested by the cop over there, like the SRO, or don't have sex, you might get pregnant, and then you may have an STD and a child. So the argument is not really ethical. It's pragmatic. Look at the bad results, or look over here at the student who really works hard, makes all his classes, shows up and stays away from drugs and gets A's and gets hired at a nice job in a restaurant as a sub manager at the start. That's a kind of a pragmatic approach to morals that public schools teach. Is that system of religion, if you will, a big driver of prison populations? Do people end up in prison because they think that way?
Well, I think that they wind up in prison because what we have a shattered family unit now. We don't have, like when we were growing up, divorce was very uncommon. But now, marriage, living together, divorce, marriage is on the minority. And so you have a lot of kids that are raised in one-parent homes, or you have a lot of kids that are raised by their grandparents or their aunts. And what's happening is that you don't have the foundation in the home to teach these kids on how to make good decisions. There are a lot of kids that are just left out to wander, and their parent or their guardian doesn't know where they are or what they're doing. They become involved in exposed to gangs because they want to belong. They want to have a sense of being something more greater than what they are. So we have this that we're dealing with, trying to encourage the students to understand that there is something greater, a greater power, and there is something that we encourage them not to make that poor decision. And one of the ways we do this is we provide speakers in some local schools that are ex-offenders, ex-gang members, ex-drug users who go in and tell the kids, I made this decision because I thought it would be neat to be in a gang, or because I had this need in my life, and I found out that that choice had very terrible consequences. And let me tell you about that. So they are sharing their own personal journey. They are encouraging the students not to follow that same path. And, it's very powerful. When someone says, this is what I did. I was a gang member. I did these things, and this was the result. And I don't want you to follow that. And here's the signs that I did. My schoolwork began to deteriorate. I was disrespectful of authority and parents. I didn't care anymore about anything. I just wanted to be that gang member. And so they can relate and see this. And, you know, we used to have, you could look at the map and see a section of Chattanooga or a section of a city or a county that was at risk. Well, now with social media, all kids are at risk because they're all linked together in an instant. So you have this influence on kids that we've never had before. And we need to realize that, and we need to realize that even though you may go to a private school, you may put your child in a private school, they're still at risk of this influence that's out there on social media.
Well, how strong is the gang influence on young people whom your volunteers address in public schools? You have about 120 volunteers, David Johnson of Prison Prevention Ministries, and you have 5 full-time staff people and a budget of about $400,000. What is the gang influence in the schools among, would you guess, among those your volunteers address?
Well, our volunteers, because we have to be certified to go into prisons, and we have to be certified to go into the schools. So our volunteers do not go into the schools. Just
staff
the speakers.
People.
Yeah, just staff people and those that do presentations.
And okay, those may be the people who are out of prison or out of jail. Okay,
yes, yes.
But they have to be certified too.
Yes, they have to. They know who is coming in, and you know, when they tell their story. Okay.
Well, all right. So the question is about the influence of gangs. Gangs are powerful because they invite they're a sort of pseudo family or a ersatz family, a false family. Young people can identify with them. They belong. There's a personal connection, a personal interest. There are often gifts.
Yes.
There is excitement. There's sex. There's drugs.
Well, yeah. The what we see is the students just want to be accepted. They want to feel like that somebody cares for them, that somebody loves them. And, you know, with what we're dealing with in a broken home, which is more prevalent today in history than any other time, is that you're missing a father, or you're missing a mother, or you may be missing both. And so the maternal guidance and leadership and love that children need to nurture and to grow and develop is not there. And so they seek it in other things. They seek it in joining a gang, the excitement of joining a gang, seeing easy money. You know, seeing this really lulls them in.
I saw a report on television, David Johnson of Prison Prevention Ministries, of a program in Georgia where there's no soft peddling the life in prison or jail, and it has inmates screaming at these young boys, saying, you know, you're my meat. When if I get a hold of you in this jail, you know, your backside's mine. That kind of thing. Very violent, vulgar, horrific treatment, sort of slapping them around almost. The program here doesn't resort to that kind of, you might say, true grit.
Right. No, we do not. We are not a scared straight program. Our philosophy is that you can get over being scared, but we want to teach you something that has value and something that will stay with you and something that is real. And you are exposed to prison life where you see it, you hear it, you smell it, and you're told that these inmates are told when to get up, they're told when to go to bed, they're told what they will eat, they're told when they will eat, they're told when they can take a shower, they're told what they can watch on TV, which is usually in the middle of a room with about anywhere from 30 to 60 inmates, and they don't get to choose. There's no channel surfing. It is on what it's on, and there's no telephone. You know, you can't go Google anything. You can't go look at Facebook. And so they see the stark reality, and it serves as a deterrent to just get them to think, well, you know, I don't want to be there. You know, sometimes on television, prison life is painted that that's no big deal. You know, go do your time and then come home. Well, it is. You're there in a cell or in a complex 24 hours a day. You have no choices. You know, the choice you have, you can come to one of our classes, or you can come to other classes. You can sign up for them, but that's about the only choice you have. You are there and you are isolated, and there's a lot of time for you to think about what you have done and where you are going.
What about the problem in the prison system, David Johnson of Prison Prevention Ministries, of there being no care for the victim of crimes? We have prisons full of people who evidently have committed a crime against another person, and there's no interest in restoration. The scriptures, the scriptural model of jurisprudence holds that there is no prison. There is capital punishment for certain crimes, adultery, rape, sodomy, and the like, and then there is restitution. There is no taking time to bemoan your sins in jail. Restitution is that if someone's been injured, then the perpetrator effectively buys back himself from that party by a compensation of time or a servitude to the victim. What do you make of the absolute lack of restitution in Tennessee?
Well, that is a judicial question, and I think one of the things that, just a personal opinion, that as we have gotten away from a biblical-based principle on how we are to govern, how we are to live, how our judicial system is to be, then we have moved away from those teachings, and it is a societal and a judicial issue, and the way that we can get it resolved is by keep bringing it up. Say that there should be restitution if someone violates someone else. The only time you see really restitution is when somebody embezzles, and that's part of the sentencing, but not in other crimes.
Well, as Gary North explains in some of his books, David Johnson, let's say I injure you in a wrong, let's say I do something that costs you an arm. Well, we go before the judge, and the question is how do I make it good to you? And as he explains it, there is effectively an auction for my own arm, because the biblical model is, of course, lex talionis, which is eye for eye, tooth for tooth, stripe for stripe, wound for wound, burn for burn. And that is the picture of true equity. In other words, the court can't impose something that's beyond what was the injury, right? If I take your arm, then my arm is forfeit. But the question for me is, all right, what's my arm worth to me? And because you have a right to take it off, right? You have a right to cut my arm off of me because I cut your arm off in a foolish accident with my chainsaw. All right. Well, I'm then in the negotiations in the court. I'm buying my arm back from you, who have a right to cut it off. I'm buying it from you, and so the price that you agree to accept for my arm is what I have to pay. So I pay you the cost of your arm by buying my own back, which you have a right to take. That's called equity, and the court biblically should be overseeing that kind of system where perhaps it's a big amount. Perhaps it's $500,000 that we agree on. I certainly can't pay that now. So what happens is I become your slave, effectively. I pay off serving you as I can to make it good. And because it's personal and not impersonal, you may decide at some point, well, David, I forgive you. I'm not going to make you pay the whole amount. And that so there's room for lenity. There's room for a personal connection because you do have a right to me. So what happens is you have a personal compensation, a personal restoration. And there's no prison, there's no state involvement. That's the biblical system. How does that strike you as a way of doing business in justice, David Johnson?
Well, I think that what that is a reflection of the Old Testament. And of course, when the New Testament came about with Jesus and his teaching, what did he say? He said, well, you need to turn the other cheek. He comes in with mercy and grace and forgiveness. And the law was written that if you sinned, then there was a result in that, because ultimately, without the law was to say that we couldn't keep the whole law, but you were tried by that. But when Jesus came, he brought a different kind of teaching.
Well, what you're saying, though, is that there is no remedy. If I cut your arm off, you have no remedy against me except prison. Is that what you're saying, David?
The judicial system would have to answer that. I mean, you can go to the civil lawsuit area, and that can be addressed. What I'm describing is a civil lawsuit. I have injured you, and now you have a claim on me. The suit, it would be brought by the magistrate. Yeah. The suit would be by you in your favor against me. I'm supposed to make good. The question is, does Jesus expect you to forgive me? Is that it? And then we part ways and nothing happens, or am I supposed to make compensation to you, David? Well, I think that boils down to a personal question. Does Jesus say that we're to forgive? Yes, he does. And that is our message as we go into the prisons, that we are asking inmates to forgive and to understand the forgiveness of God and the mercy and the grace through Jesus Christ.
We're talking with David Johnson, who is the Executive Director of Prison Prevention Ministries, which, by the way, takes no state money. It takes no federal money and no state money. Very important point. It has a budget of $400,000. Privately raised. Think about that. You, my listeners, Man Who Matters, think about supporting a ministry that has no government money, no money in this ministry of grace in its funding that is put there by coercion. David Tulis, David, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader, Nooga Radio.